The distress beacon had been silent for 6 hours by the time John Okafor's salvage tug, the Rusty Halcyon, dropped out of transit above the wreck. Debris field's a mess, Emma said from the co-pilot seat, scanning the shattered hull spinning slowly against the stars. Kaltari transport, looks like. Registry says it was carrying livestock. John frowned. Livestock doesn't send distress beacons. No, Emma agreed slowly. It doesn't. They suited up anyway. That was the thing about humans that the rest of the galaxy hadn't quite worked out yet. When a beacon called, humans answered, regardless of the manifest, the risk assessment, or the fact that Kaltari salvage law technically classified the wreck's non-crew contents as cargo, forfeit. The interior of the transport was cold and dark, atmosphere venting from a dozen hull breaches. John's suit lights swept across overturned crates, snapped restraint webbing, and then a sound. Small, wet, frightened. John. Emma's voice was tight over the comm cage, aft hold. Something's alive in there. They found it wedged behind a collapsed support strut, a Kaltari cub, maybe the equivalent of a human toddler in development, its 4 amber eyes wide with a terror that needed no translation. Its lower left flank was seared black from what looked like a plasma conduit rupture. It wasn't moving its back legs. Oh, hey, it's okay, John said, dropping to one knee. Human instinct overriding 60 years of interspecies protocol training that all said do not approach unknown xenofauna. We're not going to hurt you. The cub hissed, baring rows of needle teeth, then whimpered and pressed itself further into the wreckage. John, the manifest, Emma said quietly, pulling up the cargo data on her wrist display. This isn't livestock. It's marked as breeding stock, non-sapient designation, disposal cleared. She paused. John, these are Kaltari younglings. The whole hold is full of them. This ship was hauling cubs to a processing station. John's jaw tightened behind his visor. Processing for what? I don't want to know. I don't think you want to know either. He looked back at the cub. It had stopped hissing. It was just shaking now, small tremors running down its spine. One clawed hand curled protectively around a shattered rear leg. Yeah, well, John said, unclipping the medkit from his belt with the calm, terrible focus Emma had seen in him only a handful of times before. Usually right before he did something that violated at least 3 treaties. Somebody forgot to tell me it's not my problem. Getting the cub stable took 40 minutes, and every trick either of them knew. Emma held the trembling body still while John set a splint, packed the burn wound, and pumped in enough general anesthetic analog, cross-referenced frantically against Kaltari biology in the ship's medical database, to keep the little thing from going into shock. It was screaming when they started. It was unconscious, breathing, alive by the time they finished. 9 other cubs were still alive elsewhere in the hold, in various states of injury. The tug's cargo bay, built for scrap metal and ore, became an emergency ward. Emma rigged heat lamps out of salvage components. John cannibalized half their food store's preservation gel to make cooling packs for burns. Neither of them slept for 2 days. It was on day 3 when the first cub, the one from the aft hold, whom Emma had started calling Ash for the burn scars mottling its flank, opened all 4 eyes and looked at John without fear for the first time, that the Rusty Halcyon's comm system lit up with an incoming hail from a Kaltari corporate vessel. Salvage tug Rusty Halcyon, you are in possession of Voss Agricultural Concern property. Return the cargo immediately or face seizure charges under Interstellar Commerce Code 4471. John looked at Emma. Emma looked at the cub asleep on a heap of thermal blankets in what used to be their storage bay, its small chest rising and falling steadily for the first time in 3 days. Property, John repeated. That's what the law says, Emma said carefully. Kaltari cubs aren't legally sapient until age 6 cycles. Before that, under Voss concern registration, they're product. John was quiet for a long moment. Then he opened a channel back. This is John Okafor of the Rusty Halcyon. Your cargo sent a distress beacon. Under Article 12 of the Unified Rescue Convention, any sapient life form responding to a genuine distress call has right of custody, pending investigation. I'm invoking it. The cargo is not classified as sapient. Then it can't have sent a distress signal, can it? John said. Somebody sapient triggered that beacon manually. I'd love to know who. Silence on the other end. Then, chillingly professional. We will be filing a formal dispute. This will go to Concord adjudication. Good, John said. I look forward to it. Bring your lawyers. I'll bring the medical logs, the burn patterns consistent with industrial plasma tools, and 10 witnesses who happen to be growing new teeth as we speak. The channel cut. Emma exhaled. You just started an interstellar legal case. I just refused to hand 10 kids back to the people who did that to them, John said, nodding toward Ash, who had woken up and was now dragging himself, splinted leg and all, across the blankets toward John's boot with single-minded determination. The legal case is just what happens after. The Concord adjudication took 11 months. It should have taken longer. Kaltari corporate law was old, dense, and thoroughly stacked in favor of product classifications that had kept the vast agricultural concern and a dozen like it profitable for 3 centuries. But John and Emma had 2 things going for them: hard evidence and an inconvenient habit humanity had developed over its first 50 years among the stars of dragging cameras and journalists into places galactic institutions preferred to keep quiet. The footage of Ash, now walking again, if with a permanent limp, clambering onto Emma's shoulder during a recorded deposition and refusing to let go while she testified, did more to sway public opinion across 40-member worlds than any legal brief could have. The ruling, when it came, was narrower than John had hoped, but wider than anyone expected. The Unified Rescue Convention's sapience threshold was amended. A being no longer had to prove current sapience to qualify for rescue custody protections, only developmental trajectory toward it. Overnight, every juvenile of every known sapient species in Concord space gained provisional protected status, whether their homeworld's laws called them children, cargo, or product. Legal scholars called it the Okafor Amendment. Most of the galaxy just called it the day humans ruined a very profitable business model by being annoyingly, expensively sentimental about a screaming cub in a wrecked cargo hold. 2 years later, Ash was the size of a large dog, still favored his back leg slightly, and had developed a habit of shadowing John around the rusty Halcyon's corridors with the devotion of something that remembered, in whatever way cubs remembered such things, exactly who had been there in the dark. You know, Emma said, watching Ash headbutt John's leg affectionately while John tried to run a pre-flight checklist. The Voss concern still hasn't forgiven you. They can file it under complaints from people who traffic children, John said, scratching behind one of Ash's 4 eyes. I hear that folder's getting pretty full lately. It was true. In the 2 years since the ruling, 17 other rescue custody cases had been filed across Concord space, each one citing the Okafor Amendment, each one built on the same simple, radical premise that it started with one stubborn human refusing to let a dying cub die simply because a manifest said it didn't count. Ash made a small chirping sound and settled against John's boots, and for a species that had once been cargo, it was, John thought, a very good sound to be responsible for. Some laws get written by committees. Some get written by a species that never learned when to mind its own business. The galaxy, slowly, was starting to be grateful for both.